Hey everybody, Ray Flynn here at the third floor, and today we're going to be discussing some of the deeper details when it comes to hand management in Malifaux 3rd Edition. Thank you for joining me. This is your breakdown. Alright, how you doing everybody? Ray Flynn here, and this is the breakdown, and today what we're talking about is hand management in Malifaux 3rd Edition. I have 3 sections I want to go over, and then what we're going to do is we're going to look at some random draws, kind of discuss what I would be trying to do with those draws for a couple of crews. First thing I want to talk about is the read. When you first see your hand, what are you looking at in that hand? What's important? How many weaks do you have? How many moderates do you have? How many severes do you have? And what are the 4 suits? The goal of the game is obviously to win, and you do that by scoring victory points, and you score victory points by strategies and schemes. We're going to assume you have some cursory knowledge of how Malifaux works for the rest of this. When you're trying to get those schemes accomplished, these cards in your hand are going to help you get that done, and they're going to do that by enabling your crew. And that's where target numbers come into play, because a lot of abilities, especially a lot of powerful abilities, have target numbers you have to meet. So the stat on the ability is a 6, but you need a 12 in order for it to go off. 6s suddenly have value. Knowing those target numbers and knowing what suits you need to meet is incredibly important for mastery of your crew. What's in my hand? What's going on with my suits? Now, the next part of the read, we're going to talk about weeks. Weak cards are the cards that are labeled 1 to 5 of any suit in your hand. When do you keep them? When do you try to get rid of them? When do you stone for them? Probably need to stone if you can, because most abilities don't go off on weeks for target numbers. That being said, if your crew doesn't have any target numbers you're worried about, maybe you do keep those weeks. Yeah, you're relying on the top deck to be able to get things done, but if all of your actions for that turn don't require duels to work, like you're gonna move and drop a marker, what does it matter if there's weeks in your hands? That's a very common play mistake I see newer players do, is they look at their hand, they don't check their target numbers, and they don't keep weak cards in their hand. Keeping weaks in your hand does a couple of things. Number 1, it keeps you out of your deck for that turn. Number 2, if you don't ever have to use that card for anything, you get to pitch it at the end of the turn, so now it's out of your deck for 2 turns. And the other thing is there's a variety of abilities that require discards. And discards you don't want to be losing severes to. You want to lose weaks to those. Weak cards actually have a very valuable slot in your hand. When you first draw your hand, that's what you got to look for first. Where are my target numbers? Where are my target suits? Do I have those in my hand? And how many weeks are in here? And what am I trying to accomplish for this turn? That's going to determine whether or not I'm going to try to keep some of those weeks in hand, or whether or not I'm going to do that automatic stone for 2 cards and pitch a couple of them. Stoning is not always going to solve your problem. So you need to tackle and address the problem prior to making the decision to stone. Stoning should be something that is an attempt to aid. It should not be something to replace value. The next thing we're going to talk about is the bluff. You have a hand of cards that you're going to be looking at. You see those cards. Your opponent sees you seeing those cards. And if you draw your hand and go, your opponent saw that. Now, in casual games, who cares? But when you're playing in competitive environments, especially if you're playing someone you've never played before, giving away tells gives your opponent information. So what I like to do is 2 things. Number 1, don't organize your cards. It's a nervous habit we all do. Some of us are very OCD about it. I'm extremely OCD about it, and it took me a long time to break the habit. But organizing your cards, unless you're organizing in a random fashion just to kind of keep your hands busy, especially if someone always organizes left to right, then you're giving that information. It's like, oh, there's a severe that just went over there type thing. And you're just trying to give as little information as possible. 2 things help in this game. Can you read people's tells, and can you count cards? If you've already seen your opponent flip 4 13s and you kept track of that, then you know this 13 in your hand on a tied stat, the only way they can beat it's the red joker. That's really powerful knowledge. The bluff comes in, you don't want to give that information away. You don't want to draw your cards and go, well, that's a great hand, I'm going to stone for cards. And draw your hand, look at your hand, do the read. Check your target numbers, check your weeks, determine if you're going to stone, and let it be that. This keeps your mind more in the game and keeps you in more of a focused mindset. Composure and mental clarity, mental fortitude, those things are really, really important. Don't let yourself get sucked into, wow, this was a great hand, or wow, this is a bad hand. Again, go back to the read. Establish your game plan based off of what you drew. Don't give anything to your opponent. Don't let yourself get tilted. Your hand is a bonus. It is not the way you win Malifaux. All right, and the last thing we're going to talk about is the play. Now, I have this broken up into two sections as well, and the first section we're going to talk about is, does it matter? This is the number one mistake you're going to make in hand management, is cheating a duel that didn't ultimately matter. And what I mean is, what does the duel do? What does winning this duel enable you? Sometimes it's very obvious. You have a beater, you're trying to kill a model, you need to cheat to kill them. If you hit with min damage, they die, you just need to hit. But what if you have a scheme runner on a flank somewhere, and that scheme runner just got shot at? Your opponent happened to flip a severe. You know they've got a damage track that can take this guy out. When do you cheat? How do you cheat? That's a very, very hard to gauge concept at times. Cheating in high to try to put them on negatives or to try to save the model or what have you isn't always the right answer. You need to check the board state. You need to check to see what is happening. And this kind of bleeds into the second point, which is what is going to score you points. If that model dying denies you points and you don't have another way of recovering from that, then obviously you need to cheat something. But maybe you don't need to cheat a severe. Maybe you just need to cheat a moderate. Depending on the defenses that model has, depending on how many severes they might have flipped out of their deck, if you've been counting, depending on whether or not they have cards in their hand to cheat at all, sometimes you just take the luck. Triple severes happen on a double negative flip more often than any of us want it to. If they haven't flipped their red joker but have flipped their black, putting them on negatives actually is kind of counterintuitive because now they're red joker fishing. You want them on a single negative at best, and a straight's probably okay, honestly. It all depends on the situation. The point I want to get across here is that cheating high is not always the answer. Cheating is not always the answer. Go back to your read. Your read is what sets up your play. If you've got target numbers you need to meet, the worst feeling in the world is to cheat a card in that doesn't ultimately save your model, and now you don't have that card to meet that target number. You need to really evaluate, what is this play doing? Does it even matter? So the largest part about gauging if does it matter is going back to what I mentioned a few minutes ago, which is, does it score you points? You should be approaching the game already with a plan in mind of how you're going to score your points. Part of that planning should be, how card intensive is it going to be to pull this off? If you have a bunch of models that can do range scheme interaction, but they're all on target number 6s to be able to get those abilities off, and those are the schemes you've chosen, then that 6+ card is very, very important. Take that into account when you're building your crews, when you're selecting your schemes. What are you going to be doing to score? What abilities are you going to use to score? And how intensive on your hand is that going to be? If your crew is really hand intensive, it determines how you play that crew. You need to be able to coordinate around that, either by your model selection or by how aggressive you're cheating with your hand. And that's where we come back again full circle to everything about the play. Does the play matter? Does it score you points? If it does on both of those counts, then it should be an automatic, let's do this, let me cheat this card, generally. But if there's gray on those, give it a thought. What am I really doing by cheating this card? And will it ultimately save points, deny points, enable points, etc.? Once you've had those questions answered, now you're actually ready to cheat or not cheat as required. All right, and so the last part we're going to do for this video is we're going to change camera angles here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to deal out 6 cards, 7 cards for Arcanists. We're going to ignore them. They're dirty, filthy cheaters. We're going to deal out 6 cards, which is the average control hand, and we're just going to talk about what I look at immediately when I draw those 6 cards. We'll set up a couple of, variables like what faction I'm playing, what keyword I'm in, and just a general concept of like the pools that I'm going to be playing into and what faction. Like, is it a killy pool? Is it a schemy pool? Am I going to be playing in a Neverborn? Stuff like that. Basic information that you would generally have before you drew your first hand. And we're just going to kind of take a look at those cards and go through the process of the read and the play. All right, so here we go. Got a deck of cards here. We're going to flip 6 off the top. So here's our setup. We're playing 10 Thunders. which I know is we're going to the well a little bit here, but bear with me. Playing 10 Thunder's Lynch. So we've got a lot of card manipulation already built into our crew in the form of Rig the Deck. But what we're playing against is we're playing against a very aggressive Karai crew. It's a Killy scheme pool, and there's enough interact into it and enough mobility into it that Lynch was a good choice. That's the master you want to play. You've got that hand manipulation. When your opponent declares Karai, you know you're going to be getting into it. You know you're going to be getting into heavy combat here. All of that information, including the deployment, which let's just say is standard for sake of argument. All of that information is going to go into this initial read, even on the first turn. Even if you're not expecting to actually engage, both those crews can engage turn one, so that's not outside the realm of possibility. That's where we're starting, is that piece of information right there. You know, when it comes to target numbers, there's not a lot of target numbers to meet in Lynch's crew, but the ones that you do are 5s and 6s. We know this 5 might become valuable, but this 4-2-4, these are pitchable cards. The question becomes is, do we stone? Lynch has a little bit more luxury to ignore that right now. However, it's still a thought. Do we keep the weeks? So we've checked our target numbers, you know, very cursory, of course. We know that this 5 might be valuable, might not. There's at least, I'm pretty certain there's one pivotal duel. I think Kitty Dumont's duel, she has one that needs a 5 to go off. That's a movement-based duel. We know that we're looking at these 3 cards are valuable. These 3 cards are chaff. There's not a lot of discard to do things in that crew. I think there might be a healing ability that can do that. That's actually kind of important because healing flips in Lynch's crew are how we cycle out weeks. Or simple duels. Simple duels in general are how we cycle out weeks, because you rig the deck, you look at the top card, ideally it's going to be a severe, moderate card that you actually care about, you put your week on there, you do your healing flip, and then that week goes bye-bye. That value means that these weeks are not worthless to us. These weeks actually have play. Now, also, because of the fact that we are going to be not hopefully engaging too heavily turn 1, we're going to be positioning turn 1, that will give us a little bit of flexibility and luxury to be able to maybe keep these in our hand to pitch them for turn 2. This is the base kind of concept when I say, what are you doing for the read? You're checking your target numbers, you're evaluating your weeks, and then determining from that point whether or not you're going to stone. In this situation, we're going to go ahead and say we don't need to stone because we got the 2 10s. Do you have any severes? No, you don't. But you have rigged the deck. And most of your models in Keyword have this. So you have ways of hunting for those severes, and then you have some other card shenanigans to be able to get it in the forms of Kitty Dumont and Gwyneth Maddox. I have seen plenty of people playing crews that have card draw or card manipulation, and they'll stone this hand. I don't think you stone this hand. But unless you're playing something that's super aggressive and this is like a turn 2 hand and you're about to engage, you don't need to stone this. For a turn 1 hand, this is good. On a turn 2 in the Lynch crew versus Karai, I would stone this. That goes back to, do we need to keep our weeks or not? Well, in this case, no, we want to try to get severes because we're engaged with a very killy crew now. Now, we're pretty tough and we have deck manipulation. That's not going to get us everywhere. We want to be able to have the ability to cheat some cards in. And the benefit is that if you have knowledge of how Karai plays, she's a little card intensive. She needs some cards to pitch for her protected. She needs cards for her summoning. She wants masks for Akirio, high masks for Akirio, so she can try to get her coordinate strikes off. So you know that she's going to be hunting for cards as it is. So in that situation, it's probably safe to go ahead and stone. And actually, you're going to want to pitch these 4s if you do, more likely than not. So if your 2 cards will flip here, you stoned. We got a 7 and a 12. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for an increase in value. These 4s are what go. Because the 4s getting cycled back into your deck next turn are not as bad as a 2 getting cycled back into your deck next turn. This is either going to be a pitch, or it's going to be for your rig the deck, or it's going to be used, kept in hand until end of turn so that you can get rid of it entirely for the following turn. For the play, that's something that requires some pretty in-depth analysis, so we're not going to go into that here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shuffle this up and we're going to do one more read, and we're going to bring in one more concept of crews here. This time we're not going to take the easy mode. We're not going to take a crew that is very quick to draw and manipulate cards. We're going to take one that doesn't really have any deck manipulation at all. So we're going to go and say, let's say you're playing Titania into a scheme-heavy pool, and you're playing against Perdita, who's a ranged pool, ranged with the action point efficiency. So that's what you're dealing with. So again, flipping 6 cards. We're going to say this is turn 1 again, just for sake of ease. This is the hand that a lot of people are going to kind of dread because there's no severes, nothing above a 9. Honestly, 10 is kind of a pseudo-severe because it's that right on that kind of that line. It's not a severe for purposes of damage, but a 10 forces through a lot of hits. 9's kind of on the far side of that curve for moderates. I would maybe keep a 10 from turn to turn. I wouldn't keep a 9 from turn to turn unless it was a suit I cared about. So this hand, we have 2 weaks only, 3 moderates, but most of the moderates are in the mid-range, or low to mid-range, the 6 and 7 slot, which is not where we want to be. Again, what are we doing here? We're going to do the read. We're going to check our target numbers. There are quite a bit of target numbers in Titania, but all of them are 5 up, and then there's actually a couple that are 4 up, I believe. I think one of her abilities just requires either a specific suit or just that you basically don't flip the Black Joker. That puts you in a situation where all of these cards are valid, especially in a turn 1 situation where you might be doing a move focus or a double move germinate, a move germinate, or a double move challenge, or something of that nature with her crew, because you're going to have enough terrain down against Perdita that she's got to get into you, or she's got to move focus and use her bravado to get close enough to try to ignore that concealment. It gives you a little bit of a buffer. Also, Perdita doesn't have any real card draw other than her Hero's Gamble, which, while powerful, she needs cards in hand to pitch for her outpour out. Her hand is going to be a little intensive as well. Maybe not quite as intensive as, say, like a Summoner's would be, but if she wants to combo the hits, she's got to have the cards to do it. This, on a turn 1, is probably safe for Titania to just take. Again, you don't need to stone, because you've checked your target numbers. You know that most of these cards fit for those target numbers. Even if the 4 and 5 don't fit, you want to keep these weeks because you just want to get rid of them at the end of the turn, possibly. But that's going to bring me to probably the last piece of information, and I'm going to leave this for the last end of the video, so only those who stuck around this whole point are going to get this little nugget. Waste cards towards the end of turns. Waste cards. And what I mean by that is, let's say you do a duel that fails. And let's do an emulated hand here. Let's say this is what you've got left in your hand. You've got 2 models left to activate. Your opponent's got 1 model left to activate. What your goal is now is to get this 9 and 7 out of your hand in some way and get this 4 into your discard pile at the end of the turn. And there's a myriad of ways to do it, but the goal is to do it without being inefficient. So, I mean, you could always declare an attack against your own model and be like, I'm not gonna relent, and the defense is gonna cheat that and the attack's gonna cheat that, and boom, those cards are gone. But that's not really an effective use of AP. But what you can do is, like, let's say you go in and you're like, well, I need to go and do this duel, or I need to do this this germinate ability, and you flip a card and it goes off. Just go ahead and cheat that in anyways. It's okay. You're trying to get it back into your deck. And that's one of the aspects of the play that's actually very, very important, is being able to manage your hand so that at the end of your turn, the only thing you have left in your hands are severes and weaks. And that's going to be it for our breakdown of hand management. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and hopefully you'll stick around for the many, many more we're going to be coming. Do us a favor, like and subscribe if you haven't already. And let me know in the comments below what other videos you'd like to see on The Breakdown.